Dean Martin was on a golf course in Palm Springs when the call came. Frank Sinatra himself was on the line, and Frank never called during Dean's golf games. The request was simple: singing at President Kennedy's funeral. Every major entertainer in America would have killed for that honor. But Dean Martin said no. Frank was stunned. The Kennedy family was furious, and Hollywood turned on Dean overnight. What they didn't know was that Dean Martin was protecting a secret so explosive it could have destroyed the presidency, torn apart a family, and changed American history, and he was willing to be called a traitor to keep it buried. This is the real story of why Dean Martin refused to sing at JFK's funeral. And it's nothing like what anyone suspected. November 22, 1963, the day America stopped. President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, and the entire nation plunged into mourning. Television networks canceled all regular programming. Radio stations played somber music. People wept in the streets. In Hollywood, the shock was even more personal. JFK wasn't just the president. He was one of them. He'd partied with the Rat Pack. He'd slept in Sinatra's guest room. He'd watched Dean and Frank and Sammy perform at the Sands. The entertainment industry had rallied behind Kennedy's election, raised millions for his campaign, and felt a genuine connection to Camelot. Frank Sinatra was devastated. He'd considered JFK a close friend. When the news broke, Frank locked himself in his compound in Palm Springs and wouldn't see anyone for 3 days. Peter Lawford, who'd been Kennedy's brother-in-law, had a nervous breakdown. Sammy Davis Jr. canceled his shows and sat Shiva despite not being Jewish. Everyone was wrecked except Dean Martin seemed strangely quiet about the whole thing. He didn't make a statement. He didn't cancel his performances. He showed up at the Sands that night, November 22nd, and did his show as scheduled. The audience was maybe a third full. People who'd come to Vegas before the assassination and didn't want to waste their tickets. Dean walked on stage, did an hour of music and jokes, and never mentioned Kennedy once. Backstage, people were whispering, "What's wrong with Dean? Doesn't he care? How can he be making jokes when the president is dead?" But Dean just packed up his things and drove back to Los Angeles in silence. 3 days later, on November 25th, Frank Sinatra received a call from the Kennedy family. Would Frank organize the entertainment for certain aspects of the funeral proceedings, not the service itself, but the gathering afterward? They wanted to honor JFK with the music he loved, the performers he'd admired. Frank said yes immediately. Then he started making calls. Dean Martin was on the 8th hole at Tamarisk Country Club when a caddy ran up to him with an urgent message. "Mr. Martin, you have an emergency phone call in the clubhouse." Dean wasn't the kind of guy who took emergency calls during golf. Golf was sacred. But the caddy looked genuinely scared. So Dean handed his club to his playing partner and walked to the clubhouse. Frank was on the line. "Dean, I need you." "What's going on?" "I'm putting together performers for after the funeral. The Kennedy family asked me personally. I've got Sammy. I've got Ella. I've got Tony Bennett. I need you to sing." There was a long pause. "No." Frank thought he'd misheard. "What?" "I said no." "Frank." "Dean. This is the president's funeral. This isn't a request you turn down. I'm turning it down." Frank's voice got hard. "Why? Give me one good reason." "I can't." "You can't? What does that mean?" "It means I can't do it. And I can't tell you why." "I'm sorry, Frank." "Dean, if you don't do this, people are going to think, they're going to say," Frank struggled to find the words. "They're going to say you didn't care about the president." "Let them say it." "Are you serious right now?" "I've never been more serious in my life." "Find someone else, Frank." "I can't help you with this." Dean hung up. Frank stared at the phone in disbelief. In 20 years of friendship, Dean had never refused him anything. Not once. They'd backed each other up through scandals, bad movies, rough times. When Frank asked, Dean showed up. That was the code until now. Frank called back. Dean didn't answer. Frank called Dean's house, his manager, his agent. All of them got the same message. Dean Martin will not be singing at any Kennedy-related event. No exceptions. Word spread fast. By that evening, everyone in Hollywood knew Dean had refused. The reaction was swift and brutal. Newspapers ran stories questioning Dean's patriotism. Radio hosts speculated he must be hiding something. Fellow entertainers were shocked. Joey Bishop called him a disgrace. Peter Lawford said he'd never forgive Dean. Even Sammy Davis Jr., who loved Dean like a brother, publicly stated he was disappointed and confused by Dean's decision. The Kennedy family was reportedly furious. Jackie Kennedy in her grief asked Frank, "Why won't he sing? Did my husband do something to offend him?" Frank had no answer. Dean Martin became the most hated man in show business overnight. Venues started canceling his bookings. His record label received bomb threats. People picketed outside his shows with signs that read, "Dean Martin, un-American and traitor to the president." Through it all, Dean said nothing. He didn't defend himself. He didn't explain. He just took the hit and kept his mouth shut. His daughter Deanna, who was 12 years old at the time, asked him one night at dinner, "Daddy, why won't you tell them why you can't sing? Why are you letting them say these mean things about you?" Dean looked at his daughter with tired eyes. Sometimes protecting someone else's reputation is more important than protecting your own. But whose reputation are you protecting? Can't tell you that either, sweetheart. His wife, Jean, was furious. "Dean, this is destroying your career. Your bookings are being cancelled. People are threatening our family. You need to say something." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because I made a promise." "To who?" Dean just shook his head and left the room. The truth was buried deep. And Dean was determined to keep it that way. But the pressure kept building. His manager told him he was losing millions. His agents said his movie deals were evaporating. Frank stopped calling altogether, too hurt and angry to even speak to him. Dean Martin, the king of cool, was being frozen out of the kingdom he had helped build. 2 weeks after the funeral, Dean received an unmarked envelope at his home. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten note. "I know what you're doing. Thank you. You're a better man than anyone realizes." Ah. Dean stared at that note for a long time. Then he burned it in his fireplace and never spoke of it again. What was he protecting? What secret was worth sacrificing his career, his friendships, his reputation? The answer goes back to 1960. During JFK's presidential campaign, the Rat Pack had been instrumental in getting him elected. They'd performed at fundraisers, rallied voters, made Kennedy cool to a younger generation. Frank Sinatra was Kennedy's biggest champion in Hollywood. And where Frank led, Dean followed. In October 1960, Dean was performing at the Sands when he got a message. A young woman needed to see him urgently. Her name was Patricia Harding. She was 23 years old, worked as a secretary at a law firm in Los Angeles, and she was 8 months pregnant. Dean agreed to meet her in his dressing room, assuming this was some kind of paternity shakedown. It happened to celebrities all the time. Someone claims you're the father. Demands money. You pay them to go away. But when Patricia Harding sat down across from him, she was trembling. Not with anger or greed, with fear. "Mr. Martin, I need your help. I don't know who else to turn to. What's this about?" Patricia looked at the door, making sure it was closed. Then she said quietly, "I'm pregnant. The father is Senator John F. Kennedy, and people are threatening me to keep quiet." Dean felt ice in his veins. "What do you mean threatening you?" "Men in suits. They come to my apartment. They follow me to work. They tell me if I say anything publicly, if I try to contact the senator, if I cause any problems, I'll disappear." Those were their exact words. "You'll disappear. Why are you telling me this?" "Because I heard you're a good man. I heard you help people. And because," her voice broke, "I'm scared, Mr. Martin. I'm scared they're going to take my baby, or worse." Dean studied her face. She wasn't lying. The fear was real. "What do you want from me?" "I want to have my baby safely. I want to raise him without being threatened. I don't want money from the senator. I don't want to ruin his career. I just want to be left alone." "And you think I can make that happen?" "I think you know people. I think maybe you can talk to someone who can call off whoever is doing this." Dean made a decision in that moment. "Where are you staying?" "A motel in Henderson." "Not anymore. I'm going to put you somewhere safe and I'm going to make some calls. But you need to promise me something." "Anything." "You never tell anyone we had this conversation. You never tell your child who the father is. You raise that baby, live your life, and you forget all about Senator Kennedy." "Can you do that?" Patricia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes. Thank you." Dean made 3 phone calls that night. The first was to a security expert he trusted. The second was to a friend who owned a small house in Tucson, Arizona. The third call was the dangerous one. He called someone connected to the Kennedy campaign, not JFK himself. Dean was smart enough not to make that call directly, but someone close enough to make the message clear. There's a girl, Patricia Harding. She's being harassed by your people. It needs to stop today. We don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. And here's how this is going to work. The girl disappears. She goes somewhere quiet, has her baby, lives her life. In exchange, she never talks, never makes claims, never causes problems. But if anything happens to her, if she gets hurt, if she mysteriously dies in a car accident, then I talk. And I've got a letter in a safe deposit box that tells the whole story. Dated, notarized, ready to go to every newspaper in America. There was a long pause. You're bluffing. Try me. 2 days later, the men in suits stopped following Patricia Harding. Dean moved her to Tucson under a different name. He paid her rent for a year. When her baby was born, a healthy boy, Dean sent money every month through an anonymous account. Not Kennedy money, his own money. Patricia kept her promise. She raised her son in Arizona. Never told him who his father was. Never spoke publicly about any of it. She sent Dean a Christmas card every year, always unsigned, with just one word written inside. Safe. And Dean Martin carried that secret for 3 years. Never told Frank, never told Sammy, never told his wife, just quietly made sure Patricia and her son were protected and hidden. Then JFK was assassinated. And Frank Sinatra called asking Dean to sing at the funeral. Dean couldn't do it. How could he stand in front of Jackie Kennedy, in front of the Kennedy family, in front of the whole country, and honor a man whose secret child Dean had been protecting? How could he sing knowing that somewhere in Tucson, a 3-year-old boy was growing up without knowing his father was the President of the United States? It felt obscene. It felt like the worst kind of hypocrisy. So Dean said no. And he took the hatred, the condemnation, the career destruction because the alternative was exposing a secret that would destroy Jackie Kennedy, would mark that child for life and would tarnish JFK's legacy forever. Dean Martin chose to be the villain in public so he could be the protector in private. The boycott of Dean Martin lasted 6 months. Slowly, bookings came back. His records started selling again. The picketers moved on to other targets, but the damage to his reputation in certain circles never fully healed. There were people who never forgave him for refusing to honor the fallen president. Frank Sinatra stayed angry for 2 years. They didn't speak at all during that time. It wasn't until 1965 that Frank finally called Dean and said, "I'm done being mad. I don't understand what you did, but we've been friends too long to throw it away." Dean wanted to tell him so badly, but he couldn't. "Thanks, Frank. That means everything. Will you ever tell me why you said no?" "Probably not." That's what I figured. They moved forward, rebuilt their friendship, but there was always a small crack in the foundation, a mystery that Frank never solved. Patricia Harding raised her son in Tucson. His name was Michael Chambers. She'd taken her mother's maiden name. Dean kept sending money until Michael turned 18. Every Christmas card, every anonymous check, every year of protection. In 1978, Patricia died of cancer. She was only 41. Before she died, she wrote a letter to Dean Martin. "Mr. Martin, I'm dying. Michael is 18 now, a good boy, smart and kind. He's going to college. He has no idea who his real father was, and I've decided he never needs to know. That truth would only bring him pain. But I need you to know what you did for us. You saved our lives. You gave my son a chance to grow up normal, safe, away from all the chaos that would have destroyed him. You sacrificed your reputation, your friendships, your career for a girl you met once and a baby you never saw. I don't know how to thank you for that. I don't know if there are words big enough, but please know that you are the reason my son exists. You are the reason I got to be his mother. You are a hero, Mr. Martin, even if no one knows it but me." Dean kept that letter in his desk drawer until the day he died. The truth about Patricia Harding and her son didn't come out until 2004, 41 years after JFK's assassination. A historian researching Kennedy's personal life found records of payments from an anonymous account to a woman in Tucson. After years of investigation, they traced it back to Dean Martin's business manager. By then, everyone involved was dead. JFK, Patricia, Dean Martin, even Michael Chambers had died in 1999, never knowing who his biological father was. The historian published an article laying out the evidence. Some people believed it, others called it conspiracy theory. But people who knew Dean Martin read that article and suddenly understood. That's why he said no to the funeral. That's why he took all that abuse. That's why he was willing to be called a traitor. Because Dean Martin understood something that most people don't. Sometimes the right thing to do costs you everything. Sometimes protecting someone else's peace means destroying your own. Sometimes being a hero means being willing to look like a villain. When Dean Martin died in 1995, Frank Sinatra spoke at his funeral. He told stories about their friendship, their adventures, their bond. But at the end, Frank said something that confused most people in attendance. Dean kept secrets, big ones, important ones, and he kept them because he believed some things were more valuable than fame, more important than reputation, more sacred than career. I was mad at him once, really mad, for something he wouldn't do. I never understood why. Maybe I understand now, maybe I don't. But I know this. Dean Martin was the most loyal man I ever knew, loyal to his friends, loyal to his family, and loyal to people he barely knew who needed someone to stand between them and danger. That's not just cool, that's courage. The story of Dean Martin refusing to sing at JFK's funeral is usually told as a mystery. Why would he say no? What was he thinking? Was it ego? Was it spite? Did he have some grudge against Kennedy? No, he was protecting a young woman and her child. He was keeping a promise made to a scared 23-year-old in a dressing room in Las Vegas. He was making sure that a little boy could grow up without the weight of being JFK's secret son. And he was willing to be destroyed to do it. That's the real reason Dean Martin refused to sing at JFK's funeral. Not because he didn't care, because he cared too much about the people no one else was thinking about. The woman who'd been threatened. The child who deserved a normal life. The wife who was grieving and didn't need another scandal. Dean Martin looked at that situation and made a choice. He chose silence. He chose sacrifice. He chose to protect the vulnerable at his own expense. That's not just cool. That's character.